Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friends Talk Money. I'm Pam Kruger, the creator of Money Track on public television and the founder of WealthRamp.com.
Hi, I'm Richard Eisenberg, a personal finance writer and editor, and the former managing editor of the PBS website for people over 50, Next Avenue, where I was the editor of the Money and the Work and Purpose channels.
And I'm Terry Savage, nationally syndicated personal finance columnist and author of The Savage Truth on Money.
We're three friends who like to talk about money and all the issues that come with it.
On this podcast, we're trying to help you understand your personal finances.
To help you and your retirement get on the right path for true financial peace of mind.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to what we think is going to be a very, very special edition of Friends Talk Money, because we are joined by a woman who's been a longtime friend, not only to me, but to the entire financial services industry. I'm speaking of Alexandra Armstrong, who started her financial planning firm in Washington, D.C. so many years ago and has always been a leader in this industry. And welcome, Alexandra. By way of introduction, I want to show this. This is the 6th edition of Alexandra's book, just out, On Your Own. This is a wonderful book, A Widow's Guide to Emotional and Financial Well-Being. I want to say that when, Alex, when you wrote this book the first time around, you asked me for a little blurb for the back cover. I'm thrilled to see it again on the 6th edition. I think it's been on all of them. It says, if you know a woman who's become a widow, don't send flowers, send this book. And by that, I will tell you, this is the most unique book. Everybody sends me books. The most unique book combining financial planning with emotional well-being in an unusual time, which I must say, as I get to this stage after your 6 editions, Alex, I now have friends who are in this situation to send the book to. Why don't you explain the original goal and where it is now?
Well, the original goal was, I'm a financial planner, as you pointed out, and I had widows coming in to see me, and the advice was clearly going in one ear and out the other. And I thought if I could put together a book that would they could go through chapter by chapter. But then I realized this is not just a financial thing, it's an emotional thing that you're going through. And the emotion is preventing you from proceeding with the financial part. So I asked my good friend, who was a widow and a client, and she was widowed at 47 very suddenly. I said, and she's a psychologist. I said, would you consider doing it so we could make the message of the intertwining of the emotional and the financial? So the underlying message is, if you can get your financial house in order, then you can deal just with the emotions. But if you have both impacting them, you're just helpless.
Now, this is something that's not just the poor little me generation that never did anything about money. I wrote a column, we'll link it at our website, friendstalkmoney.org, about I mentioned 3 powerful women, the wife of a former governor, who had her own career and just seemed to me to be personally in meltdown. It was not a lack of knowledge or brains, or what happens to women that causes this.
Well, part of it is it's not, as you said, it's not the lack of ability to handle this, but the emotion gets in the way so that you just fall apart. And as you pointed out, people think, oh, it's a little old lady with the gray hair. No, and it can hit anybody at any age. I mean, I talked to somebody the other day who had a friend who was 24 years old whose husband has terminal cancer. So they can hit in any time. But what happens is that if you don't have the financial part in order and you have the emotional, then you just feel like you're out of control, when in fact you've been in control of your life most of your life. And it just makes you, so if you can just take it step by step, and that's what our book tries to do, is take it step by step. And we weave the story of 4 widows in it as so it's not just a how-to book that, your eyes glaze over when you read it. You get into the stories of the women at various ages and how they deal with it. And you say, oh, well, that's me. That I can do it. If they could do it, I can do it.
Yeah. Alex, can I ask you a question? When you first meet someone who's newly widowed at any age, they may be younger, they may not be, completely in their later years or at any time in life. I mean, I do believe that this is like the most vulnerable time for anybody. And anytime there's vulnerability combined with financial questions that someone has, it invites the predators. And I imagine that one of the first things that you want to do when someone reaches out to you or you meet them and talk to them just after, it's all about, basically helping them not do anything. Like, do you recommend that, you sort of just take a beat, don't make any, you always hear, don't make big decisions after you've, become a widow, but especially in the financial sense, if you don't have an idea of where everything is and where everything stands financially, because if it's a sudden death, then you're really, just paralyzed. And that's when I see, people reaching out for help, women reaching out for help. And that's when I say, dear God, don't let this person just hitch a ride with the first car that comes along, because they may look like they're going to take you where you want to go, but you've got to be really careful, have your guard up at that point where you need help, but you can't just take action.
Well, Pam, you could have written a book because that really is our message. And I part of the message is to find trusted advisors. And, family and friends can be well-meaning, but they're looking at it from their perspective, and it's not necessarily the right perspective. So one of the loud messages we make is don't make any decisions you don't have to make. And the problem is the widow is out of control. In other words, she's in a situation that she didn't cause, and she wants to prove that she's in control. So she wants to take action, any kind of action that makes her feel like she's in control, when in fact that may be exactly the wrong thing to do. So again, what the underlying message of the book is, get your advisors before you get into the situation. Now, if you're 24, you probably won't have them. But if you're 50 or so, you need to have people you can turn to who have dealt with other people who have been through this. And again, there's nothing wrong with seeking, I think some people in our generation, oh, you can't go to a psychologist, that means you're crazy. But you could seek help from a psychologist or a spiritual advisor who may be able to help you on the emotional side so that you can deal with the financial side.
Alex, I want to ask a question. First of all, I want to say it's great to see you again. I remember interviewing you back in the 1980s when I was a writer at Money Magazine. So it's been a while, but it's great to see you. And I love the book. I thought it was really terrific. There's a part in it where your co-author, Mary Donahue, writes that one time when she struggled making a key financial decision after her husband died, you said to her, "For heaven's sake, Mary, you make decisions every day in your work. What prevents you from making them in this area?" So that's my question for you. What does prevent some widows from making important money decisions after they lose their husbands?
That's a very good question. I think it's just they're so paralyzed again because they're out of control, that they aren't controlling their destiny, their future, and they feel so helpless. But I will say, when I said that to Mary, she that woke her up, and she said, yeah, you're right. I do make decisions in everything I do. And yes, I should pay attention. And she tells that story over and over again because it was her wake-up call. And I will say she's been a very good client. But I will say her husband brought her to meetings, and she you could see that she was sort of making lists in her head about something else. She wasn't, her husband was trying because he was older. He was 20 years older than she was. And so he picked me because he knew that she was going to need somebody eventually, but didn't expect it to happen as quickly. One of the things you also, as you pointed out, Pam, there is a difference between a sudden death and a lingering death. In my case, my husband was sick for 10 years and it was progressively deteriorating. So in my case, it was easier to deal with the death and, dare I say, almost a relief when it happened, because then I could plan. And that's called anticipatory grief. So for that person, it's a little easier to adjust because you have had time to get your pins in the row. It's the sudden death that's the hardest to deal with. But then even if somebody's been sick, you sort of psychologically think, well, I don't want to prepare for it because that'll make him die sooner. Like, it doesn't make any sense logically, but we're not always logical.
You know, when Alex and I talked, and she said, first of all, when I wrote the latest, 4 years ago, edition of The Savage Truth, it really was because Alex said to me, of course you could do it. You have to do another edition. So I was thrilled when Alex came out with this new edition. And when we talked on the phone, I said, well, the first question, what's new in this edition? She said, well, we have a lot of websites and direct links and the technology, and we expect people to use basic technology. But she said to me, Terry, the difference really between the 5th and 6th editions is that I lost my husband myself. So now you speak firsthand. I'm going to ask a personal question. I hadn't planned to do that, but did you feel any of these psychological, you've written about this for 25, 30, I guess 30 years now.
30 years.
Wait, let me set this up better. Alex's firm, Armstrong, Fleming and Moore, manages over $1 billion in terms of financial planning. So this is not someone just sitting in an office and helping a few little old ladies. The broad experience. Can you relate to us how it hit you to be in the spot you've been writing about for almost 30 years?
Well, for me, even though he had been sick for a while, when it happened, it was unexpected. He had been in and out of his situation so many times that I fully expected. So when it happened, I couldn't quite believe it. But as I said, the fact that I was prepared financially, I had the lawyer, I had help I had friends. My niece swooped in that day and said, okay, we're taking you up to my brother's, we're helping. So family and friends are so important during that. So it just gave me a little different perspective. Mary and I worked on the book this summer at my beach house in Rehoboth. And what we did was we would go through we went through it page by page, and I'd say, it didn't happen that way. We have to change that part. Or let's make one of these widows a little more savvy, because some of them were more clueless than others. I said, let's make one more with it than others, and have them deal with the situations like picking a retirement home for their mother while they were dealing with their own grief, or asking their brother to step up to the plate, that they were tired of taking care of everything themselves. So it's again the stories of the widows that I think that bring it home. So the answer is yes, I think it gave more depth to the book because of my experience. So, because Mary's experience was 40 years old and mine was brand new. So the combination was helpful.
Yeah. So I imagine for some, it's the most difficult part is the scary financial part. For other people who perhaps it's a sudden death, it's more the emotional part. And then to have some kind of simple, because you know how it is when there's an emergency, you think you have it all figured out. And then when it happens, you're like, I need clear instruction. It's almost like what you're suggesting with having that, sort of to-do list of things to turn to a little bit ahead of time, to know from your book, to take the resources and create that, okay, here's what I'm going to do first, second, and third, because I know when I'm in shock, I need somebody to say, you're going to do this and this and this. Don't give me 5 things, just give me 3 things I can digest and I can do.
Well, it definitely is the way it's done. In fact, there are a couple of single women who actually are in the financial field, and they read it and they said, I learned some things here about what I should be doing. And that, again, is the underlying messages. And speaking, Terry, to what you were saying, my niece who swooped in is my executor of my estate. And I thought, I need to have a list for her of my advisors, who to contact, et cetera. Like, for instance, in our case, Jerry and I had never discussed our funeral, never discussed it. And so we gotten as far as getting cremated and gotten ashes. That was taken care of, but I got the ashes and I didn't know what to do with them. So
Oh my gosh, wow, that's
I worked
interesting.
it out. But so here am I, who's written the book, and we hadn't ever talked about this. As it was, I remembered him talking about a friend who had a big cocktail party and had planned his wake. And that's exactly what I did for Jerry. So I figured that's what he wanted done. We even played When the Saints Go Marching In at the end of it. So
Alex,
his name was McCoy. So
Do what you wanted, yeah.
Alex, one of the things I thought was interesting in the book was when you write that women generally tend to be more conservative about making financial decisions than men, but that when some women first become widows, they try to make the decisions the way they think their husbands would have. I wondered, what do you think of that, and what advice you have for women about this?
well, it is true. And sometimes, particularly if it's somebody, again, there's so many individual factors that go into it. If somebody has gotten married right after college or after school and has been married 50 or 60 years, they tend to say, gee, what would have Joe done? Whereas if somebody is in a second marriage or is married later on, in my case, I married 30 years ago to Jerry, they will handle it differently. They may be a little more less traditional, but the fact is, what your father would have done or what your husband would have done doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right thing for you. And again, that's why. And I know I'm an advisor, so it sounds like, but that's why I'm in the business, because I think what we do for people is so important. We can an objective view to your situation and say, I've dealt with 20 other widows, and they face the same things, and these are the things that you can do. So the experience of somebody outside who has dealt with this before is so invaluable.
Right. And this is not really, the book is not just intended for widows. It really, as Terry pointed out in her column, that it's also such a helpful guide for adult children, women who have just, become divorced, so it's just
And women who are married.
guide.
Yeah.
Women.
Wait, I want to say this. Okay, it just occurred to me that my endorsement should have changed also over the years. Mother's Day is coming up, and I think whether you're anticipating widowhood or not, I want you to give this to every woman, because you can go, bite your tongue. This is not about you, but it's about all the things you need to do so that in the long shot, I got a pitch. I'm superstitious. If you read this now and you're organized and prepared mentally and emotionally, this won't happen to you. I want you all to give this seriously to women for Mother's Day. I also want to say, this will sound self-serving, but Alex, you mentioned that that part of it is organization. If you go to terrysavage.com, I sell nothing on my site. Don't take names. I just have a newsletter. There's a box on the top right. It says personal financial organizer. Print out, it's a 4-page thing. Print out a bunch of copies, as many as you want. Staple the 4 pages together. When you're together at Mother's Day or Father's Day coming up, or you're with the family, give a copy to everybody. Have them fill it out. It's where's my safe deposit box? Oh, by the way, where's the key? And who's a signer on it? Where's the cemetery deed? And who's my lawyer? And who has a copy of the estate plan and so forth? It's just a checklist for you that would maybe get you organized. But everybody, you can Google. Everybody's going right now. I hear them out there. Alexandra Armstrong. Wait, she's a financial planner. She's in Washington, D.C. Pam, you always know that your planner doesn't have to live in your city with you with Zoom today. Look at all of us here. No. So you can Google Alexandra Armstrong. This is the woman you really want to be dealing with
Yeah,
if you're thinking this might be coming along in your path.
exactly. Alex, I was just going to say real quick that sometimes, because I work with so many women who are either just divorced or, are in the situation where they're newly widowed. And when I'm, kind of connecting them to, an advisor who can help them, this is such a specialized area, rarity, that it's a hand selected. So it's just like with you, not every advisor can provide this. That's why I think, people just need the best messages to take your time and don't make any decision quickly about who you're going to work with. I know you need help. I know it feels like, help now, just anybody who sounds like they know what they're talking about, but there's so few. It is so rare to find you and what you do specializing in this area. And I just want to emphasize that, you're there and there
Right,
are
time
very few.
for another commercial. Alex, you may not know what Pam does, but I think you do. I think we talked about it. Pam created wealthramp.com, WealthRamp, to connect fee-only fiduciary financial advisors, a carefully vetted list across the country she's put together. You don't pay for this, says the customer. And she personally matches you up with advisors, she knows them all, that would be able to help people in this situation. So either Alexandra Armstrong, or if you want Pam to match you up, at wealthramp.com. This is,
as I will say, even with Zoom, et cetera, I think you're best working with somebody in your locale. And the reason is that you know the real estate, you know the other advisors in your area, particularly in that first year. We have lots of clients all over the country, all over the world, but most of them started in Washington, D.C. So I do think you working with somebody local. I will put in a plug for a certified financial planner, because that is, when I started, there were 411 CFPs. They're now 97,000 CFPs.
Yeah.
So not every CFP is great, but at least they've bothered to go through the regimen and get the basic knowledge and then build on that. So I think that's really an important credential.
I agree with you about the personal rapport part too, especially with, typically when someone dies, the biggest asset might be, aside from the savings in the bank, is the equity in your home. And women tend to get very emotionally attached, to the house. And just any old advisor doesn't understand the complexities of figuring out the emotional part of the attachment to the house and helping to give an unbiased, fresh look. So just be careful. That's all I'm saying, is be careful. And I agree. I think that local help face to face in this case is ideal,
particularly in the initial stages. And one of the first things that most widows want to do is pay off the mortgage. Now, as we all know, Terry particularly, if you have a 3% mortgage, you don't want to pay that mortgage off unless it's but on the other hand, you don't want to hold on to the mansion. The other thing is, oh, my children, I want them to be able to visit me. Well, they visit you for 4 days once a year. You do not need to hold on to your 5-bedroom mansion. So that's the sort of thing that the local person can help you with.
Alex, some people in our audience are men, some of them are married men. What would you want them to know and maybe do so that if one day their wives do become widows, they can be helpful now for that day, should it ever happen?
Well, the first thing is, as Terry said, fill out the organizer and make sure your wife knows where it is. And make sure that your wife is included with the meetings with the advisor. I know that there's a statistic that widows leave their husband's advisor with a rapid rate. And I say that's never happened to us. And it's because we made sure that the wife is involved, even if the advisor has to say, Mary, what do you think about this? Not Richard, what do you think about this? I've got to make sure the wife is involved. If the wife is involved, and she should be, just like Mary's husband made sure that she was involved. And even though she didn't pay attention, at least she turned to me when the time came. So I think that's really important.
Okay, well, let me ask you to leave us then. with, let's just make 3 points. Look, here's the statistics. We live long. Richard, that was a great question, first of all. Thank you for asking that from the man's point of view. There are a lot of men out there going, yes,
Sure.
good point, Richard. But the actuarial statistics are that women will wind up alone, whether you've married or you have a partner or you never married. And so this advice is pretty general, but we'd all love to hope that at the end of our lives, there's someone that their lives that matter to you, and that the loss will be a shock. So why don't you leave us, Alexandra, with 3 key points to remember, whether the shock comes slowly over time through an illness or abruptly through some kind of accident or something like that. What are the 3 points you would like women to know?
Well, first, as Pam pointed out so well, don't take any irrevocable action. You don't have to. In other words, postpone, because recognize that you're in an emotional state and you're not going to think as clearly as you might six months from now. So that's number 1. Number 2, get a good advisor who can work with you. And then 3, try to prepare ahead of time if you can, so that you only have to deal with the emotional part and have to do less with the financial side.
It has been wonderful having you. Alexandra Armstrong is a legend. She really started this, the first woman ever to really build a business as a financial advisor. And of course, lasting to the $1 billion they've managed today. The book is On Your Own, A Widow's Guide to Emotional and Financial Well-Being. It's on Amazon. And here is my pitch for you to buy this for Mother's Day. You could say, Mom, I'm superstitious. I hope this never happens. But it's better to be prepared. That's the message of this book. And I hope you will all do that. I get nothing out of this. And Alex, at this point, that's not about it. It's about helping people be better prepared. So Alex, thank you for all you've done. We appreciate having you here.
Well, thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks. And join us on the next Friends Talk Money.
Be glad to.
Thanks for writing the book, Alex.
And thank you.
Friends Talk Money is funded in part by a grant from the Investor Protection Trust. The IPT is a nonprofit organization devoted to investor education. Since 1993, the IPT has worked with the states to provide the independent, objective investor education needed by all Americans to make informed investment decisions. Visit investorprotection.org. We also receive support from the North American Securities Administrators Association, known as NASA. It's the oldest international investor protection organization. NASA's members include state and provincial securities regulators from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico who serve on the front lines of investor protection. Recognizing that education and awareness are powerful tools in the fight against investment fraud, NASA is pleased to sponsor Friends Talk Money. Here are 3 important tips to help you protect your money from fraud. With investing, there are always risks. So be cautious of anybody telling you that a certain investment is guaranteed. You should also proceed with caution if somebody is promising very large investment returns. This is a common red flag for investment fraud. Last and most importantly, be sure you're working with a licensed or registered financial professional. You can check your advisor and make sure they're licensed by visiting brokercheck.finra.org. NASA is your partner in keeping you safe and helping you avoid investment frauds. Visit nasa.org and click on the Investor Education tab to learn more.